Brilliance Audio presents The Beauty of Broken Things by Victoria Connelly, performed by Jan Kramer. Helen Hansard was a dreamer, but the 9-to-5 usually got in the way. Not that it stopped her completely. She always made sure that there were little pockets of time to daydream, no matter how busy she was. She'd never make management, she knew that, mostly because a good portion of the time she sat in meetings was spent staring out of the window, watching the way the wind moved through the one beautiful tree that grew in the central London street, or the way sunlight flirted with the office windows opposite. It had been the same at school. Helen's teachers had been constantly shouting at her for staring out of windows, but it couldn't be helped. Helen had that rare quality of being able to see beauty wherever she went, and, luckily for her, it made her rather mundane job bearable. She'd spent the last 10 years working for a small advertising company, Fines and Fairchild, taking a graduate placement straight out of university. She hadn't meant it to last so long, only life seemed to have settled in this particular rut, and the dreams she'd had of doing something better, more interesting, more creative, were always on hold while matters like paying bills took precedence. But oh, how she lived for the little moments in between her job. It was as if she became a different person as soon as she left the office, shaking off the shackles of her administrative role and entering her other self, the truer version of the person she knew she was, the version she put out onto her favourite social media site, Galleria. Helen had discovered Galleria during an aimless ramble around the internet and had soon been swept up by its magic and the photographs of beautiful gardens, of footpaths through woods, and small holdings where people were growing their own food and delighting in every minute of it. Here, she'd thought, was a little corner of the web that wasn't concerned with politics, that never discussed the horrors of war, and that didn't encourage debates you couldn't win with strangers who didn't really care anyway. Galleria felt like a safe haven where people shared their happiest pictures, beautifully framed, with gentle words to accompany them. Helen adored those little square boxes of joy, and would happily scroll through them several times a day to keep up to date with the people she was following. Some of them, she knew, were making a living from their art. They'd gathered thousands of followers, and were now being courted and paid by companies for product placement. Helen wasn't sure how she felt about that. On the one hand, it was always an admirable thing to be able to make a living from doing what you loved most. But she had to admit that the product placement thing did rather detract from the whole ethos of being oneself. Mind you, that was another issue with social media sites such as Galleria. How much of what you saw was true, or rather the whole picture? Helen had often asked that question, and had become very aware of it when she posted her own photographs. The Helen she was presenting to her followers was the fun, free version, whose world was full of beauty and charm. Gone were the spreadsheets, databases, endless emails and conference calls. She had happily banished the photocopier, the filing cabinets, the boardroom meetings, and the many other dull bits of her life. Galleria was most definitely a highlights reel of her and everybody else's life. For who really wanted to take a photo of a sink full of dirty dishes, or share that mouldy patch on the north-facing bedroom wall, or the mountain of ironing waiting to be done? Oh, no. Galleria was a blissful escape from all of that. It presented the very best pieces of people, the beautiful bits, neatly edited into one perfect square, accompanied by a poetic sentence or two. And Helen had bought into it big time. Only her photography was slowly becoming more than that. She didn't always want to squeeze it into one perfect box per day. She wanted to experiment and explore. She wanted to flex her creative wings and see if she could fly.